The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible forever. What's happening? Benton here. Let's find out if Benton, going third person quite early in the stream, has any thoughts. Shout out to the chat. I am not reading comments at this time. Shout out to replay crew and distractions. Epstein, right? All this Epstein stuff in the news. And how many times is the royal we going to hear, oh, it's all a distraction? It's all a distraction. Now, my response would be, if one is not able to explicitly or to describe in detail what one is being distracted from, then of what relevance, what is the meaning of, well, it's all a distraction? And see, that sounds like a negation to me. It's a dismissal, right? And what we see is that, a psychologically enslaved populace is powerless by definition, or, is able to exercise, whatever power the society grants it, temporarily or on an ongoing basis to serve the system. All thoughts, all behaviors, right? Anything. I would say this. We've been talking about this concept of in the world, not of the world, and that meaning not being properly understood or conveyed, and that expression not properly used. What I would posit is that the in the world part, that's the location within a delusion, right? An adversary, a vacuous, delusory adversarial realm of business transactions, also known as earth or this realm or hell realm, heaven or hell realm, presently manifesting as a hell realm, whatever we're calling it today, right? So in the world, not of the world, well, the sphere of influence, the individual's power center, right? The individual's potential for power over, and they say, what do you mean power? Power over anything whatsoever. Okay, so the internal being the sphere of influence or my energy sphere, that's located in this realm. Okay, within a delusion that there's a possibility of a place, time itself, space, not outer space necessarily, but confining this mostly to the United States of America, right? On the United States of America, as some might say. Now, what I would say is virtually everyone is in a United States of America or the United States of America, and the United States or a United States represents a state of psychological enslavement at a mass level. That's the external. Okay. So the energy sphere, the in the world part, the in the delusion part, that represents power, right? And this is a binary. So in the world, right, internally, potential power within the sphere of influence. Externally, right, virtually no power to do anything. That's the psychological enslavement, right? Because once we go to a collective, if I'm in Los Angeles, California, and I have managed to psychologically free myself within my own sphere of influence, let's say 75% psychologically free, okay? Maybe it's greater, I don't know. This is just in a thought experiment, once again. Well, the likelihood, it's a very high statistical likelihood that whomever I'm interfacing with, whether it's a clerk at a store, a passerby on the street, a bus driver, whoever this may be, someone I may have struck up a friendship with or an acquaintanceship in the past. Well, that's external. I have no power over the reality, right? That effectively every single one of those individuals is in a condition of psychological enslavement. To what? What are they psychologically enslaved to? This is where specifics are important. Well, those individuals are psychologically enslaved to society. Society itself is the means or the mechanism or the the mass, the body, the construction to which psychologically enslaved individuals are enslaved to society and society's expectations and society's norms, everything sociologically that goes along with performing. Again, performing within the context of society, to perform within the context of society based on the norms, the sociology, the expectation, the culture of society. I'm asserting, right? This is my argument, one of my arguments, that by definition, within this delusory realm that's made what I am its enemy, right? To exist within society is to, in some way, tacitly consent or acquiesce, right? Whether by consent or acquiescence, does antithesis what does antithesis care? Antithesis has a specific goal or result that it's aiming to achieve. It's a machine engaged in a process, or more correctly, it's designed a machine. This place, right? Moloch's machine, and the machine is endeavoring to create a specific result. And one of the ways, or part of the way, or most of the way, perhaps, that's being accomplished, and make no mistake, that is what's being accomplished here in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. This is what is being achieved. Based on the notions that God is in control. Oh, you mean the prince of the power of the air, the God of this world? What I'm referring to as antithesis, the thing that's made an enemy of what I am, and what I am is one with the most super intelligent force of love and power in creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, right? Um, you know, the source of authority, true authority, the source of truth itself, right? Source, right? Love, okay? So society is actually the mechanism, or the main mechanism, whereby individuals, what realistically, what choice is there? There's always a choice in a vacuum, but you know, who, and this is going to sound like I'm bragging or tooting my own horn. It's not. I'm asking the question, already suspecting to know the answer, but who is going to, you know, uh, do whatever is necessary to throw off those psychological shackles, and hopefully understanding that would represent a great change, you know, for someone, the individuals in this realm, the vast majority of which being sacrificed, to Moloch, in the form of, Moloch representing industrial and post-industrial society, consumerism, in America, the national religion being consumerism. So this stage of what they might call post-capitalism or late-stage capitalism, and consumerism being the engine that runs or drives society, buying things. Right now, it used to be producing, right, producing things, and then the consumption was a byproduct. Now it's, in fact, consuming. So, in order to serve society, the individual in a state of psychological enslavement, they do as they've been taught. They've been indoctrinated. These individuals have been taught. They wake up in the morning. When they're minor children, they go to the public indoctrination center, most of them, to be taught the very basics. And once the basics are taught, reading, the so-called 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is effectively, that's that's all I was taught formally in school. I was taught virtually nothing in school beyond that. I learned the rest on my own. But yes, they did teach me to read, write, and do basic mathematics. Thank you. Much appreciated. And so then later, the individual reaching, what's considered the adult age, and then it's, it seems like nowadays, and for many years now, more often than not, off to the university, off to college, even if the young person is not really college material, right? I certainly wasn't. I was in a way, intellectually. My mind functioned in a certain way. In other ways, I absolutely was not college material at the age of 17 when I left for university. But that's neither here nor there. It's not about me and my story, because my life has unfolded exactly as it had to, out of necessity, in order to grow and change and overcome and transcend as I have. And that is my victory. And now part of what the Christians would say is, no, you don't get any credit for that. God did that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Aren't y'all the gods in control people? I'm pretty sure y'all are talking about the prince of the power of the, not you, the listener, my apologies. I'm pretty sure those Christians are talking about the God of this world, the prince of the power of the air, what Dylan referred to as the chief commander, who supposedly, you can watch Bob Dylan on an interview saying that that's where he received his talent. He made a deal with the chief commander of this realm, right? And I sort of lost my train of thought there, but it'll be okay. Why did I bring up Christians and God and what they would say about God? I don't remember. Probably doesn't matter. But yes, the psychological enslavement of belonging to any of society's institutions, including religion, including the church, especially those things. And apologies for not for taking the tangent, for taking the tangent and then hitting a dead end, because I forgot where I was going. Now I'm mixing my metaphors. Oh well, it's all part of the fun. The royal we shall get there, based on experience here. And so I gave the example of the internal. I think that was going to be an interesting rest of the tangent. Hopefully, I'm going to try to be a little patient, see if the rest of that returns. What was I talking about with the Christians? It's just completely lost. And I'm not manifesting. This is not manifestation. This part of it may be the early onset dementia, if that's a thing. I'm not manifesting it. I'm saying I'm on the lookout for the possibility of some of that. And so a lot of these ideas I'm having this morning is tied into, I don't follow the news as ardently as I once did, and I haven't been consuming any of the Trump Epstein content, which to me is non-tent anyway. I think the point I was trying to make, I was nudging up to a greater point about how Americans, due to their psychological enslavement, Oh, I wait a minute. My apologies. I think I was not getting credit for over. Okay, that's why my apology. Yes, I brought up the Christians because the Christians will say, "Well, you don't get credit for that. God gets credit for that," and they think they mean the Alpha and the Omega, the Most High, right? Well, guess what, folks? That's what I am is one with that force. So, yes, Benton, persona, personality, right? The one um, pulling the strings of the performance, at least at this time, right? The puppet master, if we think of a Benton, right? Um, Puppet on a string. Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Hello, my ragtime gal. Right, doing his little performance here in the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. So who is speaking, right? So if Benton is doing that performance, right? Well, what's the being or the part of the being that's doing the observing and reporting and coming up with the ideas or interfacing with the ideas while Benton continues to perform? Well, that's presumably the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, if that's in fact where Benton is identified within himself in this moment, as long as he's not strongly identified with the vacuous, the validity or the authority, not that it has either one, but with the lies, the notion that this place could ever be genuine, right? The idea that this place could ever be anything but a world of lies. And how much mileage does the media, the various systems of man, right, society, the powers that be, how much mileage do they get out of implying, right, that it's either not a world of lies, or when the world of lies is showing through so strongly, to then imply, well, yeah, it's right now it's manifesting as a world of lies, but there's a potential for the world of lies to be set right, to be reformed, to be wrestled and reckoned with and sort of brought to heel, right? No, that's not possible because of what I started the stream talking about, which is when I interface with the public, there's a very high statistical probability that whichever individual I'm interfacing with is at a high level of psychological enslavement to society. That's just how things are. That's the reality on the ground. Okay. And the fact that within or via Benton's performance within all of this, within society, and a product of society's psychological enslavement, well, at least one individual has transcended, which means to move beyond the limitations of that psychological enslavement, not claiming to be free of all psychological enslavement, right? Referring to society, the psychological enslavement of being, again, in a state in the United States of America, a state of mind, consumerism as the national religion, sexual depravity, just you don't need me to go down the list. Um, uh, the whole thing, right? Well, the church going Christian would say, well, you don't get credit for that. God did that. God, the glory goes to God. Oh, you mean, well, if you're referring to uh, the highest levels of, love and creative force, yeah, same thing. That's what I'm one with. That's my essence. This idea that Bob Dylan made a deal with the chief commander, right? The God of this world. Well, what would Dylan presumably have, what's portrayed as the bargain is selling of one's soul, right? Which would be, in my view, one's birthright, born spiritually perfected into this delusory realm, right? To sign over the rights, okay, or maybe just a pledge to never strongly identify with, what the system would portray as Nancy Pelosi's spark of MS-13 spark of divinity, or this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, which I've identified as a mockery of, again, what I am. Don't see a lot of little lights shining. I see none, actually, every once in a while. Okay, but of course, Benton, right, or at least the voice coming out of Benton's body here, right? Of course, whatever that is gets the credit. Whatever that is the credit. But then maybe there is no credit, because whatever that is, again, what I am, one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. Well, it lacks the ability to be held down and psychologically enslaved to this world. So I get, maybe Benton doesn't. I don't. Maybe I've changed my own mind here. Is that possible? But I think you know what I mean. The humanized Benton, certainly gets to claim credit for that. And again, that's internal authority. That's true authority is within me. God is love. The kingdom of love is within me. That's the highest form of authority. That's in me. Okay. There's no evidence. I see no evidence of that existing externally. And I'm not saying it's impossible. You're going to have to take me to the love externally. You have to show it. Now, every once in a while, it's like, yeah, a mother and her child, a mother that actually loves her child. We can't take for granted that each mother loves each child. That's certainly not the case. Right. Same thing with a father, protecting his family or whatever. Yeah, there's glimpses and flashes of it. And remember, folks, if the being is in a state of fear, there's no possibility of love. The human heart is unable to experience both fear and love simultaneously. In fact, that's, according to my research, that's the major means or mechanism whereby the child, in the Fitz-Springmeier model of how the Illuminati create a total undetectable mind control slave. That's the mechanism, is to force the child to experience both fear and love simultaneously, right? Which is, practically speaking, not possible. It leads to psychological schisms, a splitting of the psyche, right? Very psychologically damaging. Well, certainly done to me, although, whether, I guess it would have been, in my case, formalized. And I would say it happens pretty much across the board in a more, informal manner, perhaps. Built into the delusion. This is all built into the delusion. This is not, oh, well, man's governments and man's technologies, eventually advanced to a point to where human beings discovered how to mind control and create psychological schisms. Absolutely not. That's all built into the delusion. That comes with the territory. That's just here, right? And then we get into the development of individuals, right? And the fact that, yes, individuals develop, but they typically develop based on society, and society represents psychological enslavement. So it's actually, all advancements are towards or in support of or reinforcing society, which operates primarily via the enslavement psychologically of the individuals who comprise the mass. Right. So that's your 330 million Americans, or you can say 300 million plus illegals, right? However you want to frame that, doesn't makes no matter to me. But however many individuals are in the United States, right? That mass, well, society, consumer society, the powers that be, banking, corporations, the principalities and all of this, the kingdoms of the world, that's all operating America. It's operating society. And how is it doing that? In a corporate structure, by indoctrinating the individuals to be more alike than different with respect to how they respond to stimuli, right? So what's this Epstein thing? Well, that's a stimulus. And then what will the response be? Well, I'll tell you what the response won't be. Uh, none of this stuff is going to amount to a hill of beans, right? Um, nobody's going to get in trouble, right? Trump, nothing's going to happen to Trump except as may benefit the system itself. Whatever results from this, however this thing shakes out, will absolutely strengthen and reinforce the system, society, the system itself, the systems of man, the psychological enslavement. So at the end of the day, the only possible result is to reinforce psychological enslavement via this whole Epstein thing and other mechanisms. But that's all that can happen. Nothing else can happen. So the only reason I'm even talking about Epstein is I saw on his backup channel, CoffeeZilla. If anybody knows who this is, I'm not even going to get into an explanation. But it's at least someone that's like, okay, I might want to hear what he has to say about all of this. But I know too much. I've spent too much time studying, conspiracies, the system, government, the financial system, even the Epstein stuff I've looked into, quote, looked into, right? As if Benton is some sort of authority, and again, that's the idea that an individual could even have power externally. It's like, and you want to talk about arrogant or prideful or so-called egoic. Well, yeah, I'm a free American, and by God, I looked into that Epstein stuff, as if that's a delusion within a delusion within a delusion. See what I mean? That's to delude oneself. That's a psychological enslavement whereby the individual has been convinced that they have any measure of authority and power whatsoever outside of themselves within a delusion. That's not possible. Based on what a delusion is, what I am can't have. How can I, if what I am were to begin to exercise power and authority over this realm, would the realm itself even exist? Right? Because what I am isn't capable of doing any of this except via delusion. Right? So for this place to even be here in this form necessitates what I am not being in control of this place, or at least not in direct control. Now, you could argue, yes, still in control, but via a psychological enslavement of individuals that comprise a mass within a delusion. And I would say, okay, perhaps, but that sure is a lot of caveats, right? And the fact that I'm able to reason that, the royal we are able to reason through all of that in the moment, that's another sign that this is the highest level of thinking present in the so-called truth community. Yeah, there's any number of channels I know their username on YouTube, even though they're no longer showing up in my feeds. I can type, the @ sign in the name of the channel, and I can go listen to the exact same level of thinking that I was listening to 5 years ago. What's the point? Right? What good is that? And if I'm even capable of continuing to be entertained, because make no mistake, I view this as entertainment, what I'm doing here. I view YouTube as entertainment. However, I happen to be one of the few individuals who's entertained by thinking for myself, by listening to other people who presumably were at least thinking for themselves up until they stopped thinking for themselves 5 years ago and got locked into some specific worldview. And how did they get locked into this unchanging, dead worldview? Because remember, truth is manifest and living and in flow. Once that flow stops enough to uh, crystallize the thinking enough that I can go back 4 years later and go back to all of these channels, and it's all the exact same level of consciousness and thinking, right? That proves that the individual has stopped, or the content creator has stopped growing. And I would posit or assert that the main mechanism whereby that happened is they formed a community formed, a collective formed, and then it created its own culture. And that culture psychologically enslaved the group to where the thinking is no longer able to advance. And for whatever reason, Benton here, the royal we, is unable to, I'm not able in the long run to be ensnared or entrapped into that. So at one point, my thinking was at a level to where, I was able to sort of fit myself in, get in where you fit in, right? And sort of do my own thing within, a collection or a loosely affiliated ad hoc collection of individuals who are making content. But because my progression continued, because fearlessly, I will not stop moving forward my own thinking until my brain is not capable of it, or I'm just physically not here anymore within this delusion. What a happy day that will be, certainly. Or I don't know what the day will be like, but to finally be liberated from this enslavement. You're right. Because even if I'm freed from most of the psychological enslavement, I'm living amongst a bunch of psychological slaves with no capacity or ability, again, no external power to free them. Oh, people are waking up. Let's go out here and wake them up. That's not possible. That's not a thing, right? And I've explained why in the past. That's not a thing, right? Again, that's external. There's no external waking up. The only possibility of air quotes waking up is internal. Again, a wholly individual experience individually. And that means I don't get to, and you don't get to intervene externally with respect to anybody else's so-called waking up or psychological enslavement. That's their business, right? That's on them. Now, yeah, I can help them if they seek my guidance, and those are tips, hints, and tricks. It's like a person who plays video games. When the new video game comes out, the highly anticipated, Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever, when that comes out, they almost always have a booklet, like a $20 book that a person can buy. Well, that's the tips, the tricks, and the hints on how to play the game, right? So yeah, that's my ability to assist others with respect to them freeing themselves from psychological enslavement. Yeah, I can represent the hints, the tips, and the tricks. Right. That's about it. So there's no waking up. So we've most likely, if I go back to some of those channels, there's going to be notions of waking up, right, and reforming dystopia, and then the loop into problem solving, right? Because if one is so psychologically enslaved in service of this system to believe it's even possible, despite where's the evidence that waking up is possible, right? I mean, externally, I have power over all of these things, again, within myself, within my sphere of influence. That's where my power lies in this world. I have no external power in this world, none, zero, effectively, none whatsoever. But the inverted realm, from day one teaches us power to the people, strength in numbers, right? Herd mentality, you know, and the realm itself constantly directs all focus and attention and efforts, again, externally and into the masculine or the yang form of energies. So away from things like trust, surrender, acceptance, passivity, right? That's off the table, especially for Americans in the United States of America, in that state, right? And this idea that anything achievable, it's only achievable through via aggression, assertion, and dominance. Again, masculine or yang energies, right? But not strictly speaking male and female, right? So the system, in order to serve the system, right, it will recognize, in order to psychologically enslave the individuals that comprise the masses, this delusory realm and antithesis had to begin from a place of understanding that psychology. This is the advantage, right? This is the spiritual war, is that the spiritually perfected being, right, enters into delusion, right? So the indivisible force, the highest forms of love and creation possible at the highest levels, the quickening spirit, right? Thesis, proposition, enters into delusion, a delusory realm, right? Physically, even though that's not even strictly speaking possible, but in a realm that at least seems to be physical, the child leaves its mother in a state of spiritual perfection and innocence. And if, again, setting aside for a moment the philosophy of solipsism, so assuming that child, so if in a thought, because I can't be sure, Benton can't be sure, the royal we can't be sure of that. So in a thought experiment where that's how when each baby leaves its mother, let's just, for the purposes of the discussion, let's accept that, right? And is then from day one the process of psychologically enslaving it. So that's the if the being knew from day one what the score was, then antithesis and Moloch's machine, there'd be no point to this. There would be no point to this realm, right? The only point, this realm has one point and one point only. The crux, the reason, the only meaning, right, with respect to this realm, the vacuous, adversarial, delusory realm of business transactions, it's antithesis seeking to validate itself, right, and to claim authority, but understanding it has to do that via human psychology in a machine, right, Moloch's machine, in a delusory realm based on individuals performing, delivering a performance, via personality and persona, and then those individuals comprising masses, in this case, the United States of America as a mass, and then antithesis being able to operate that mass such that mass has no power other than the power that antithesis, the thing that makes an enemy of what I am, allows it to have in order to serve the goals of antithesis, right? So we have whoever the so-called elites are at the top, the administrators of the system. Well, that would presumably be whoever has proven the most willing and able to serve the antithesis of the most powerful and the highest forms of love and creation possible, right? And if what you are is the same as what I am, you can't relate to that. I have no way of relating to the inverse of the highest forms of power, of love and creation, because that's what my essence is one with. And that force has no capacity. It lacks the ability to experience itself in relation to the inverse except via delusion. That's why this is all happening, is for that experience to be possible, because that force would trust. See, now we're into the feminine. See, so surprise, surprise, Moloch's machine pushes everybody into the yang, away from trust, right? Away from their own nature, right? Yeah, away from trust. And I don't even remember what I was about to claim trust in. Okay, yeah, what I am, it is only able to trust, right? And then what we see is that within a delusion, the nature of something trusting, that's a chump. That's someone who's quickly victimized, right? That's someone who's going to be used and abused and discarded when they're no longer useful, right? The trusting person. Okay. And then, within the progression of Moloch's machine, right? At what point does that people, the people who are that trusting, at what point does that no longer serve Moloch's machine? Right. This is all quite important. What's up, Rick? And I know some of this might be hard to follow, but do better. And that's the answer. See, that's the answer to everything. Is individuals do better. So this idea of waking up or the loop into problem solving, and well, if people would just do this, that, and the third, listen, until individuals go within their own energy spheres, within their own sphere of influence, and grab their balls metaphorically and take complete responsibility and control and tap into their own internal power, right? There's no hope for anything other than psychological enslavement. If your hope is placed for this realm is placed, if you put hope in the hands of psychological enslavement, there's hope, right? There's zero hope within this delusory realm. There's no hope whatsoever of the masses existing at anything other than psychological enslavement until individuals do better. So the solution, right, is individuals must do better. Well, I don't believe that's going to happen collectively, right? I've done it. I'm doing it now. I'm going to continue doing it, right? I will never stop. Okay. Benton won't, because Benton faked it till he made, and you can't fake it till you make it. So that's not even the right terminology. But Benton, again, trusted and surrendered to certain notions. And the trust was, I don't know, nobody can guarantee, it can't be demonstrated that if I engage in these practices, spiritual practices, if I do raise my conscious awareness and raise my, you know, raise myself up within my own sphere of influence, mind, body, and spirit to a certain level, you know, I had studied notions around self-realization and so-called true knowledge of self. There's no guarantee that I would receive that because it's a passive receiving, right? Again, yin. So the most valuable, um, and I don't even want to get into specifics, but you can see any being who doesn't even understand yin and yang enough to realize that they are almost always externally pushed and forced or coerced or compelled into yang and external, and thereby almost always precluded from going internal and using yin or feminine, right? That's so basic, right? And how many years of practicing did it take me to apprehend an idea that I now consider to be a basic idea? It took a long time. So what? What else do I have? I have all the time in the world right up until I don't. I have all the time within delusion right up until I don't. So what's the difference? Well, when again back to the psychological enslavement is, well, the time is short, time is money, right? Time is money. Your purpose is to consume and produce for capitalist society, especially those of us at a certain age who were raised up with Cold War propaganda. You going to work every day, you going to, back in the day, a factory, right? A blue collar job, whatever the job was back in the day, that directly defeated the Ruskies. That's Cold War propaganda: is go to work, get your paycheck, support your family, buy the products, and that defeats the USSR. Because remember, America was portrayed as morally superior because of the free society, right? So as society was becoming even more psychologically enslaved, it was promoting the idea of a free society, and it was doing it through what? A negative motivation, again, by an other, right? Oh, well, there's the USSR. They've got bread lines, and when they go in their store, there's one type of just, it's a can that says beans, and it's just whatever's in there is whatever's in there, and you just buy canned beans and you get what you get. America's the land of free choice. America's where you go to the big box store and look at all the products, right? Oh yeah, look at all the products. Corporatism, that represents corporatism. Hmm. Great. Now the psychologically enslaved individual's entire life can be about service to a monetary system, service to a financial system, a banking system, various corporations, right? Government, to sort of administer and manage and supposedly, you know, through the will of the people. Here's the will of the people, right? This is the will of the people. And this is why I bring up the CoffeeZilla stuff. The will of the people is to tolerate whatever happens. See, it's actually, there is no will of the people. The will of the people, let's boil it down. When you let's distill this into a one-word description of what America represents at the level of will, right? The will of the people equals cucks. And I don't use that term very often. I don't like that term. I knew the very first term I heard that word shortened. I knew what the long form word was, and I knew, generally speaking, the definition of the long form word, cuckold, right? Not a fan of the term cuck, never have been. However, the will of the people in America, that can be boiled down to, if that was one individual, if we just projected it all onto one person, that person, will of the people, that's a cuck. That's a person who will just, or what cuck has come to mean, is a wimpy person, a wimpy male who just tolerates and acquiesces to whatever's happening. And if anybody's familiar with what used to be a very popular content creator, iDubbbz, who used to do this series, actually he still does it, but this content cop, many years ago, iDubbbz, made millions of dollars on YouTube, actually, and other platforms, but primarily YouTube. Made millions of dollars, and now he got married to this lady Anissa, and then, so, part of my entertainment is I follow some of these lolcows and all of this stuff. The Kino Casino, one of my favorite shows. It's on Kick. I just watch the highlights on YouTube. Kino Casino, probably my favorite show overall. And iDubbbz is the ultimate, what cuck is now used to mean. It's just Anissa runs the show. Whatever iDubbbz is made to do, he just shows up and does it. Doesn't matter what it is. There's no end to what can be demanded of iDubbbz, Ian, who took his wife's name. No bullshit. He's Ian Jomha, Jomha. That's his wife's last name. See, there's no end to what he will acquiesce to and tolerate. That's the will of the American people. So this idea that, oh, it's a representative government, you know, it's just, oh, there's all this political division. Like, no, absolutely not. The people are psychologically enslaved and lack the ability to exercise or to even form any means whatsoever that could be uh, properly said to represent a will of the people, right? It's just not a thing. Now, when I talk about this yin and this yang, well, the system has people out here, Moloch's machine has people out here, well, they're accessing the yin energies to acquiesce, right? To just say, well, what can we do about it? And throw their hands up and say, well, it's not up to us. What can we do? We've got to operate based on our psychological enslavement, which has us, remember Cold War propaganda, in order to defeat the Ruskies, we have to go to the factory, support our families, and consume products because this is the land of freedom and consumer society. We have to have 10 different types of beans, canned beans, because 10 different types of canned beans defeats the Ruskies. And this is what people accepted. People accepted these notions. It's a bunch of nonsense. What are you talking about? Huh? You know, so now my whole life's purpose is to defeat a mostly unseen enemy by making rich people richer, right? Through my own blood, sweat, tears, efforts, energies, and toils, through employment. And employment pays for, you know, all of these things that are undeniably evil, right? Un- Undeniable evil perpetuated um, via people going to work through a system of employment and funding evil, right? That can't ever be a good person. How can now when a person doesn't know that that's what they're doing, right? The ignorance of all of that, or being ignorant towards all of that, that's one thing. And so for me, this is a bell that cannot be unrung. You know, how can I, in good conscience, support all of that, right? Now, until individuals, this is back to the idea of the will of the people. And what would happen is the until the will of the people is a least common denominator, right? Or maybe that's the most. Either way, it's the level at which the masses are operating. So the fact that I've individually grown and changed and evolved and overcome and transcended, well, that's neither here nor there, because that doesn't convey or confer anything whatsoever onto the masses. Do you see the strategic advantage of antithesis now? So unless I'm going to be Methuselah and live long enough to see enough individuals, which I'm pessimistic that it would happen anyway, but when enough individuals within society raise themselves up individually within themselves internally, well, when enough individuals do that, at a certain point, the people begin to lack they're no longer able to be ignorant of evil. They're no longer able to turn a blind eye to evil being done in their name. They're no longer able to form, create, support, or continue to perpetuate a government that is evil, right? And humankind is incapable of creating and operating systems that are free of corruption. There's no precedent for it, because the only way that would ever happen would be the mass of people. Right now, maybe when it was tribal society. So let's only talk about industrial and post-industrial, right? So I think if we go back far enough, probably there was some tribe of 20 to 50 people somewhere who, you know, could probably disprove what I'm saying way back in the olden time. You know, with respect to modernity, so-called, you know, industrial revolution, post-industrial, I would say probably all of American history, most likely. You can't, I'm asserting that there's no version of pointing to any, there's no precedent for the mass of people in this country working together and creating and operating a system free of corruption in a way that serves the people. It's never happened, which leads me to believe that it never will happen. Now, I've identified how it possibly could happen. And again, I'm very pessimistic because what would it require? Until individuals do better, it's not possible, right? And there's so many of those individuals, presumably. Now, again, maybe solipsism makes more sense because if it's just me in this version of the simulation, again, if a person can't say exactly what's being simulated, it's like, well, what do you mean this is a simulation? If it's a simulation and you are so sure it's a simulation, what exactly is being simulated? And if you just point to the world outside you and say this is being simulated, that won't get it. And I have a logical explanation for why that won't. No, that doesn't jibe. You might think it jives because you haven't thought. Again, not you. Now I'm picking on the listener. My apologies. But one may think, oh well, yeah, of course. Well, logically, I can explain why that absolutely not. It's not enough to observe to reach a conclusion that what one is observing is a simulation, right? Well, how can we know what the original? We still need to have an understanding of the original concept or whatever was the original goal to simulate, right? There has to be an image. There has to have been an imagined something, or just an actual phenomenon that exists, that's observable somewhere else, that's being simulated within this delusion. Do you see what I'm saying? Specificities, specifics. And as much as I get accused of speaking broadly and generally, I see a whole bunch of people who won't go into specifics. It's like, well, how can I be accused of speaking broadly and generally, but then I'm going into more specifics about a lot of this stuff than anybody else that I see anyway? You know, how is the royal we? The royal we cannot allow uh, others to have it both ways. You know, that's not going to happen. Benton within a delusion is not going to, art of war style is not going to give that much of an advantage to the enemy. What I am, the force I'm one with, it's so confident and so in touch with its own nature, right? Now, you might call this arrogant, right? Where I'm from, it ain't bragging if you can back it up. See, where I'm from, I was socialized in a culture. It ain't bragging if you can back it up. See, so the nature of what I am, well, it's like, hey, it trusts and is confident in the knowing that, hey, what I am can't even conceptualize all this bad shit that's now happening within delusion. And that creates the suffering, right? There's the suffering. So surprise, surprise, Benton here has experienced almost no suffering, far less suffering since Benton came to understand exactly what the fuck Benton is. But not to suspect it, not to have deduced it, right? Not to have had a hint or an intuition, right? Not to have faked it till I made it to a certain level. Oh no. To be 100% confident and certain with the knowledge of what I am and experiencing what I am on that basis. Because how else is it possible to experience virtually zero levels of fear, anxiety, stress, and all negative states that one may inhabit? As if a switch was flipped. I went from one day experiencing lower levels of all of that, although I was in a quite fearful state for an extended period of time because of the fake pandemic, and not being scared of germs, but scared of being controlled directly, right? I'm not a fearful person, but we all have, I can't say we all, but it seems to me like most people have some things frighten individuals more than other things, right? Phenomena, at the level of phenomena. And the pandemic rang all of my bells, certainly. Yes. But see, there's just like there's nothing in this place worth having, because again, what I am represents ultimate value. It is the value, right? Well, the same thing. What is there to fear here? And see, and I don't even want to call it a byproduct, right? That's comes part and parcel with the true knowledge of self. Yeah, I have a logical mind, I have a psychology, I have a human thought process, right? Or I have access to these things within this delusory experience where I can concoct and conceptualize and observe phenomena to be fearful of. But remember, what I am lacks the ability to conceptualize that, my true essence or nature. And what I am, it lacks the ability to even experience fear whatsoever. So just like there's nothing here worth grasping towards, right? Or seeking to possess, right? And I know this implicitly now, but I did not know it in the past, although again had considered many ideas, fake it till you make it style, which is not very effective overall. To now understanding and knowing, like, yeah, what's there to fear here, right? Strictly speaking, when properly identified, I can't fear the possibility of hunger in the near future, right? Which is most likely going to be a reality, but not necessarily. I have no way of knowing. Benton, the royal we, has no way of knowing. And also, so we have a dual means of the fear, right? The fear of lack of nutrition could then push or motivate the royal we into seeking employment, right? To then fund and further enforce and perpetuate the system to my own detriment, right? To Benton's own detriment. In some way bowing down to something lesser than myself, right? Through these activities. And then lock me back into strongly identifying with society. And my assertion is that society exists and operates at the level of individuals being psychologically enslaved, and then 300 plus million of those individuals, 99 plus percent of them representative of individual psychologically enslaved units that Moloch's machine finds addressable, right, to be mobilized in various ways. That's the opposite of power in numbers. That's disempowerment in numbers, depending on what is the individual wanting to serve. Because remember, I distilled the will of the people down to the will of a cuck, the will of one who acquiesces to whatever it is. Whatever shows up and demands or asserts and says, hey, acquiesce to this. And America, right? People in the United States of America, psychologically enslaved, that's to acquiesce, right? Or if assertion is acted upon, right? Yang assertion, then it's in ways that perpetuate and strengthen the system itself, right? A perfect trap. So there's nothing to be done here within what's there, because remember the loop into problem solving is, oh look, big brain Benton figured it out. Now big brain Benton is here to solve it. Absolutely not. That's straight out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And if y'all think you're MAGA, and I'm certainly not, but if y'all think you're MAGA traditional family values conservatives, so-called, how is somebody that identifies that way going to operate based on the lefty playbook, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, where in leftist ideology, the moment that a person on the other side begins to speak of a problem, the tactic is to immediately put them in the problem solving role, and then it's an easy matter to ridicule and pick apart the solution, right? To then have them create their own straw man of, well, you're not capable of creating and operating this solution anyway. Well, guess what? Yeah, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Well, Saul Alinsky or whoever wrote that wasn't smart enough to devote it to Lucifer on the first page, meaning no traditional family values Christian's going to read it, or traditional family values they're not going to read it. So the enemy will publish a playbook, and then the person who thinks they're a conservative will be conquered by the playbook that the enemy knew that all they need to do is dedicate it to Lucifer, and y'all won't read it. And in the book, it says, when these people want to talk. So when the people want to talk about the problems of, let's say, trans kids or whatever, well, the left just says, okay, let's hear your solution to all of this, and then just lays back, watches the straw man be built, and just burns the thing to the ground. Right? This is tactics. This is strategery. Right? This is Benton as field general. Right? This is a war. Right? And y'all are the troops. Okay. Benton is the fucking war general. And of course, Benton, the war general on his horse in the metaphor, can see the battlefield, and the troops can't see the battlefield because they're in a fucking big herd of troops. Right. I hope you understand what I'm showing you here. Right. So what I mean by individuals must do better, individuals must pull themselves up by their bootstraps within themselves, right? An internal pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps to where they, bit by bit, rise above the level of the masses, to where within this metaphor, they now are able to see the battlefield, the spiritual battlefield, see, in which they see, oh, there are tactics and strategies, right? And maybe I should read, oh, look, there's the enemy's battle manual just laying there on the ground. Maybe I should pick it up and read it. Oh, well, it's devoted to Lucifer, so throw it back on the ground because we're scared of ideas. We're scared of ideas, so put it back where you found it. Actually, let's just burn it. Or flip to the next page. Or flip a few pages. Oh, look, here's a part where it talks about the tactics of what to do when somebody within society identifies a problem. Make them immediately loop into problem solving. Now, what do I see for 5+ years now on in the so-called truth community on panel channels? A never-ending series of somebody mentioning a problem and then looping into problem solving when there's no power whatsoever externally to do anything about any potential solutions. And then Big Brain Benton at a certain point observed all of this and says, well, you know what? And then when they say, well, what's your solution, Benton? And I'm like, well, you know what? Until the system asks me and says, hey, man, what's your ideas for fixing dystopia? And then if your idea is good enough, we're going to give you resources and authority and autonomy and power to solve these things. Until all of that is demonstrated to me, why would I waste my time? Right? Why would I waste my time doing all of this? Well, the reason why they're wasting their time looping into problem solving is because they are under psychological enslavement. And that's what they've been programmed to do by the enemy. The enemy is operating them psychologically. And then now they're confused as to why I'm not behaving like them within this society, this small society that they've created for themselves, the so-called truth community. And this is also why the thinking cannot advance, because they've just moved, they've signed up for a smaller version of psychological enslavement, a group, right, within the larger group or groups of psychological enslavement. It's the same fucking thing. It's the same reason why waking up is not a thing, because the individual believes that they became aware of certain things, maybe conspiratorially, Jeffrey Epstein, fiat currency, the federal, the whole thing. We've all, most of us have been down those rabbit holes. And so they erroneously, and this is what I mean by raising themselves up individually within themselves, they erroneously become aware that they were in a false reality, right? Well, that's not the error. The error is not to become aware of a false reality. The error in thinking is to assume, oh, false reality would be represented in this case by a zero. Because I'm now no longer in the zero, I must be in the one. So the one would represent true reality. And my thing is absolutely not. A vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, after your parents sacrificed you to the pagan deity Moloch, you were inserted into false reality. But false reality is layered, meaning when the individual believes they've exited false reality into true reality, they've merely ascended to the next adjacent level of false reality, or the next parallel level, whatever that is. And what I would say is, why would antithesis, why would this delusory realm give a flying fuck which level of false reality an individual is operating at? Because they're still operating in a layer of false reality. So what's the difference? And what I'm here to tell you is this realm perpetuates a never-ending series of false realities, so that the individual, and I see this within society, on both so-called sides. I don't even like those terms, the idea of both sides, but to just continue to ascend or descend layers of false reality. Well, that's a trap. That's a prison. So how can and I've never heard this anywhere but me. I'm the only person who's ever heard this, I've never heard anybody but me say this, right? Ever. I've heard people kind of get close to it here and there, but I've never heard anybody break through to the full idea. And I demand, like, I'm very intolerant. So this idea of acquiescence, right? This idea of America, the will of the people, representing cuckery or cuckoldry, right? Acquiescence. Well, part of what I am, right? What I am is very intolerant. It lacks the ability to tolerate certain notions within delusion, right? So this idea that love, uh, in order to practice love, one must practice tolerance. Well, that's what the American people are practicing. They're practicing the tolerance of whatever banks, corporation, and government and power structures choose to do to it. And that can never be love. Love isn't capable of standing back and allowing all of this. And that's why when I say there's no love to be found here, and yes, I'm speaking very broadly and generally, and I'll also say there's always exceptions to everything. If you find a minority of, oh, well, there's a little bit of love over here. Look, there is a little light of mine. It is being, one of these beings is letting their little light shine. Well, okay, that's great. That's anecdotal. That still doesn't disprove the overarching, what I am asserting here in an overarching fashion. It doesn't negate that. Right. And in fact, I just used perfect logic, more or less off the top of my head. Some of that was ideas that just came to me in the moment via epiphanies, right? And the intelligence is for me to be able to work with the various concepts. You're welcome. But I just logically proved, and this is what a lot of people don't understand about thinking, thoughts, logic, and reason. Many things can be proven using logic and reason. I hate to break it to you folks, because that feels some type of way. People don't necessarily like how it feels when faced with the true reality, or the truth within this delusion, at least, that even if it's just the Kybalion notion of all truths are merely half truths, either way, I don't want to get too ahead of my skis here, but the reality is, it is possible to logically prove certain things. As far as I can tell, I just logically proved that this is a realm that lacks love. But the realm will perpetuate itself, society perpetuates itself, promotes itself based on notions of, well, it is loving, and that each human being is basically good and is loving towards one another. You got to prove it. I'm going to need to see it. And part of that is the idea that love is caught up in and engaged in tolerance, right? Well, that's situational, right? That's not, how could that ever be an across the board tolerance? Because evil shows up and people go along with the evil, right? Tolerating it from day one. Now, this does get into some rather heavy notions around antithesis, thesis, proposition, antithesis, Book of Job. What I would say about that is, well, that was already in the context of a delusion, number one. Book of Job, that was already within the delusion when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, right? Well, that's already within delusion because the sons of God, strictly speaking, can never be discrete individual beings. That's only possible within delusion because remember, the indivisible force is always one, right? And that's what some people, think they mean, or they're at least attempting to convey when they talk about we are always one at the highest level, and that always bothered me, right? Well, not within delusion, right? Not when one is strongly identified with a delusion, a delusory realm, like absolutely not. That's evil and wickedness, you know, um, attempting to bind people together based on perpetuation of evil, wickedness, hatred, everything that's the inverse of love, you know. Excuse me. Oh, pardon me. Sorry. My apologies. There is a cough button. And what is that strong coughing? See, what is that? That's exorcism, folks. That was an unclean spirit, a wicked spirit, or a demonic spirit saying, I've had enough of this. As much as based on what the Bible talks about, the wicked spirit, it wants to inhabit a human or an animal. The last thing it wants to do is be wandering in the dry place, seeking rest and finding none, right? That's the last thing it wants to be doing. So one of those entities has been hanging out and hanging out and hanging out within Benton's sphere of influence, while Benton almost every day prays. And this is where the power in the name of Jesus stuff I've found very useful, right? It's because the wicked spirits don't like it. That's where the power is, or I shouldn't say that's where the power is. That's where I find part of where I find power in it. And so this has happened to me a few times, on a couple of times on the stream now. And one of those entities said, I can't take anymore. Right? My will is stronger than the will of these demons. Think about that. Because what I am is far greater than anything any of us could possibly conceptualize or imagine in our limited human forms. That's how great and powerful and valuable what I am is. See? But not a human psychology, not a Benton as persona, personality, and performance. The soul, the essence, the core, right? Source. And so that individuated, wicked spirit with its own personality, its own consciousness, it said, I've had enough, and it fucking left. And the demon is expelled through the throat chakra. And people can poo-poo the chakra system all you want. And it's usually Christians that call it all a bunch of nonsense. And I'm like, well, your book talks about casting out demons in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus, Many demons have been cast out of me, and I'm here to tell you they every single one of them left through my throat chakra. So I don't know what to tell you. Coughed out, right? Expelled. Okay. Because presumably the entities would be in the lower chakras, right? And the throat chakra being in the throat area. Yeah. And that was I hit the when I hit the cough button. That first cough, if you think that was a strong cough, after I hit the cough button, man, it was strong, powerful coughing. Right. But then now, what would this realm do based on if people valued this? Wow, look, there's this ability to maybe he can teach other people to do this for themselves, right? And pretty quickly, if I'm dumb enough to listen to these psychologically enslaved individuals that comprise society, they'll have me making my entire identity. They'll have me out here externally making a business, right, out of assisting people. Right. That's a violation. That's to curse one's blessing. The blessing is that I incarnated here, right? Well, that's not the blessing necessarily, but the blessing is that after incarnating here, Benton, right, has done these things. And that's when the parable of the talents and the person who gave the biggest donation ever to this channel, $250, also known as a tactical nuke, Bazookov, thank you, sir. I don't know if he's still around or not. I've ran a lot of people off with the direction this channel has taken, especially. See, I hit a sweet spot with the Christian type and the Jesus talk, and people were kind of rocking with me for a while. And then it took a bit of a turn after the recent true knowledge of self. And people still try to stick it out. But, um, you know, pretty much all of the people who have a Christian bent or leaning have certainly, not all, but I would say most at this point. I could be wrong. I'm speculating. It's fine. And see, it's ultimately these discourses are to my benefit because look, I don't pretty sure that particular little piece of wickedness within my energy sphere would not have seen that as a time to make its exit, right? Because these servants of antithesis, as much as they want to inhabit a human's energy sphere, or if that's not available, the energy sphere of an animal, because that's the only way they can enjoy whatever particular sin they like. See, these disembodied spirits, they can't enjoy whatever it is they're into. They need something to act upon or to act through, which would be me, you, or hang out in an animal, waiting around for, oh, here comes an incorrectly behaving human. Once a human wanders by who's in a state of wickedness that operates based on what that is in the wheelhouse of that spirit. Now that spirit has the legalese to go into the human, right? And in fact, where I've gotten with my spiritual journey or walk or whatever cliche we want to call it is, I've been doing this for several years. I'll be having certain types of thoughts at times, or something will be going on that I'm kind of unaware of. I'll come into awareness of it, and I'll also come into awareness of a wicked spirit being present. Now, this could all be in my imagination. I'm aware of this while it's happening, but I invoke the name of Jesus out loud, not in my head. See, I don't believe it works through thinking. The Bible talks about the tongue a lot. And I know as a child, a lot of the things we were taught, around say your prayers and all of this, that was all in your head, right? I'm of the firm, well, knowing actually, but it must be spoken aloud because that's the word, right? That's the sound vibration. That's energy. That's an energy form. My thoughts, yeah, it's all vibrating energy on some level, but there's a reason why the Bible, in my view, talks about the word of God. That's, in my world, that's a sound vibration. So I just speak aloud, hey, wicked spirit, this is not your home, meaning this energy sphere belongs to me, right? So I'm invoking legalese. I'm invoking the law over that spirit, and I'm invoking what? Authority. So that's power in the name of Jesus is based on authority, and it's based on the spiritual state of the individual, meaning, again, what did I talk about earlier? The answer is for individuals to do better, right? That's, you want Benton to loop into problem solving. Hey, not you, the listener, but society, y'all got to do better individually, right? So people can poke fun at me sitting around talking to myself in a car all they want, right? I can go out here and identify seemingly innumerable societal ills, and they can say to me, "Okay, what's your solution?" Oh, I'm glad you asked. My solution is y'all got to do better, right? And they say, what about you?" I say, "Oh, that's what I'm doing now. I've already completed the process that in order for society to be fixed or reformed, which I don't even believe to be possible in the first place, but within this thought experiment, if you're asking me what my solution is every individual that ain't me must do better, right? Every individual, and again, I'm speaking hyperbolically, effectively, every individual other than Benton must do better than they've done in the past, must do better than they did yesterday, do better than they did earlier this morning, must do better than they did the moment before, because that's my overall spiritual practice has been a never ending, in each new moment, right? Clap, clap, clap. Here's a now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone, all day every day for years. What I've been working towards is, in each new one of those, is to be slightly less bad in certain ways than the moment before, right? Or eventually, when the being becomes actually reaches, uh, the breakthrough point of, oh, okay, now we're no longer bad. Now we're moving into the good territory. Now it's to do slightly better than the moment before, and to repeat that process, and to never not repeat that process, and then to never bother with gauging the process day to day or week to week or month to month, spiritually surrendered and trusting that the progression will happen, using time as an ally, meaning I don't need to concern myself with each little tiny bit of progress. And yeah, there will be moments, there will be days, there will be weeks perhaps where I make virtually no progress. Well, if there's a day where I strive to make progress and I make zero progress, well, what would that day have looked like without the striving for progress? Probably I, instead of winning the day or losing the day, I fought the day to a draw. See, people aren't competitive and strategic enough to honor the zero, right? I woke up that morning, I strove spiritually, it didn't go my way, and I ended more or less where I started. Well, I avoided backsliding, I avoided going backwards. If there's an overall if there's an overall video game score, whatever my score was that morning, it was the same score that evening. Without my efforts, it would be less of a score, right? And this is what I mean by do better individually. And see, this already sounds like insanity, because these are all systems created within me, on behalf of me, in service of me, the individual. Because remember, that's my only power, is within me internally. That's it. There's no power outside of myself. None. No power outside of oneself. None. No power whatsoever outside of the individual. From the individual's perspective, no power. None. Now, the system wields power. I'm talking about from a power to the people standpoint. From a, hey, me and you are more alike than unalike, we all more or less want the same things for our lives. But see, now we're already in a collective, our lives. Like, what do you mean we don't have a collective life? Spiritually, there's only individual lives. Yeah, there's individual spiritual lives within a nuclear family, within a church, within, at a workplace, in a neighborhood, sure. But spiritually, it's always individual. See, it's never collective. So all problem solving at a collective level, it always goes back to individuals have to do better. And until individuals do better, there's no hope. So until I see actual concrete, demonstrable evidence, not lip service, not, oh, well, we just feel like progress is being made, or, well, progress is being claimed without evidence. The meaning of the word suspicious, by the way, that's what suspicious means, without evidence, right? Or that's at least part of the definition. See, because how many people would, even if this was to be enacted in society, how many people would be fooled simply by those who claim the progress? You know, and part of acquiescing to everything, back to the iDubbbz as cuck example, the will of the people in America is to acquiesce to whatever is demanded of them. They will tolerate anything, right? Um, a person who operates that way, an individual who operates at the level of acquiescence doesn't question. So when the other people, right, when the psychologically enslaved people claim individual progress, the will of the people, represented by iDubbbz the cuck, just accepts that and says, oh, okay, well, individuals are doing better. So problem solved. Moving on. I guess Benton didn't know what he was talking about, because look, there's still societal ills, right? Do you see the trap, right? And again, okay, Benton, what's your solution? I've solved it. The trap is solved, folks. Benton solved the trap. And then now there's confusion. What do you mean? The trap is still there. Yeah, we're not into specifics. Okay, Benton, what are the specifics? Yeah, where did Benton solve the trap? Internally, because that's the only place he has power. Benton can't solve the external traps because Benton doesn't have power over the external traps, because this is a wholly individual experience. Antithesis, for whatever reason, is being given the opportunity to make traps, to ensnare y'all, and to ensnare earlier versions of Benton, right? Benton detected and defeated the traps, but only within himself, because that's how it works here. It does. I don't have the power. I don't have the capacity to resolve external traps, and that's why this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions has psychologically controlled the populace. At the moment I begin to speak this way, is to push Benton into the external and say, okay, well, how about these traps? No, no, no. Those are external traps. I have no power over those external traps. So again, what's the solution to the external traps? Individuals have to do better. See what I'm saying? The realm can never gaslight Benton now, because Benton understands that the gaslighting operates by always pushing the individual into the external, unless, and more correctly, pushing them into the external via yang energy or masculine energy or aggression, assertion, and dominance, which Americans are psychologically enslaved and indoctrinated to believe that anything achievable is only achievable through aggression, assertion, and dominance. So even if individuals are convinced to do better, they're psychologically enslaved such that all their efforts to do better individually will be away from their power center, which is internal. The effort will be directed by the system of enslavement externally, away from their power, and it will be they will be made to attempt to achieve outside of their power through an aggressive, assertive, dominant means. Man will dominate man unto his own injury. If you want to know the future of human history, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever, like a stamp, right? Not stomping, stamping, like an assembly line. Here comes a human face. A boot stamps it. Here comes a human face. A boot stamps it. Here comes a human face. A boot stamps it. Right. Probably in some way an allegory for each new moment, right? Being a choice between serving what I am, properly identified within myself, or serving this realm by closely identifying with the validity of this realm, which I believe would be represented in each new moment by the boot stamping your face. Moloch, right? Stamped with a big M for Moloch, metaphorically, perhaps. Or antithesis, right? Antichrist, all of these things. And then, the system's got people out here looking for a physical antichrist. This whole place is antichrist. What are you talking about? And this is why I talk about the Bible is not to be taken whole. It's for me. I'm only speaking for me and my purposes. I'm not giving advice or dictates to anybody else. What I'm saying is, from my perspective, this is a lot of harm, a lot of potential harm in the Bible, right? That's an incorrect notion. It's just simply incorrect. And I've already forgot. It's so incorrect. I've already forgotten what it is. That's how incorrect it is. I don't even remember what it was. It's gone now. All right. Well, that's enough out of me for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.